There's nothing better to practice your basic technique on than a green onion. And you might want to start just with one onion. Eventually you can stack them up, line them up, and cut them in multiples. Another thing to note if you're a home gardener is I never throw these away. These are living onions. You can replant these and get more onions. So I have at home virtually a year-round supply of green onions because I'm always planting onions, planting seeds, planting remnants, planting out last year's onions that have split apart. So onions are one thing that you can definitely quite easily grow at home with one little garden planter. And these are great little freebies that you get from every onion you buy. So yeah, throw them in a Ziploc bag with a moist paper towel and they keep for months. And then you can just poke a little hole in the soil, poke them down, leave them. A few months later, magic, out comes a green onion. So as far as cutting a green onion, it's a great way to practice your basic technique. And this is one where you can be kind of strict about gripping it with your thumb and little finger, and then having the claw grip like that, and then chop, 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 using the rocker motion. Again, it's both, it's rocking, it's down, and it's forward like that, like a saw blade. Green onions, oftentimes, there's different uses for the different parts. I often will cut all my white parts off and put them aside for my mise en place for maybe in a stir fry. That might go in with your onions, with your maybe other onions, or maybe it's your only white onion that you're using, so it goes in and it gets sauteed initially with usually your garlic and your ginger. But the green onion is a lot more delicate, and you can either make that into fine little bits if you want a very delicate flavor. You can have these nice little round bits, or it's very common to cut a green onion on the bias where you're cutting it at an angle like this. You'll see this often in Asian cooking where you get these little bit larger chunks and they hold their texture a little bit better and give you a nice burst of umami onion flavor when you bite into them. So let's get into some practical uses for your chef knife. Let's take some nice iceberg lettuce, and let's make some finely shredded lettuce like you might have if you were making tacos or some sort of a bowl where you want to have that as a garnish, or maybe you just want a finely shredded salad. In any case, there's, as is true for many things, there's more than one way to skin a cat, including this right here. So this is the way that I do it. There's a core that's bitter and that you generally don't want in your dish. And what I generally do is you can slam it down like this, but I usually take my hand and just go pop like that. And then you end up with this little core. And they're actually quite good for you, so I usually eat it. It's bitter, but it's good for you. And then you're left with this, which is a bit rolly. So one of the things you can do is to cut it right down the middle, like so. There we go. And then to shred your lettuce, you look at the grain here, and it's this way. So I'm going to take and slice. And when you're doing this normal rocker motion with your chef knife, and you have something big like this, then it's going to be a little bit modified to be more like a chop. But again, you still want to use kind of a claw grip. In this case, I'm going to sort of have my whole hand, but over like this, and still mindful that my blade is tilted a little bit this way. It still keeps that blade edge away from your hand, and you can go as fine as you want. You could take the time and just shave just a very little edge of it until you have this, really, really fine shredded lettuce, or you can make it a little coarser. Depends on the purpose. If it's a salad, you're going to go a lot coarser. But anyway, that's more of a chop that you're going to use. But again, the claw grip and having your blade slightly tilted, especially at the very top there, that's going to keep that blade away from your hand. So let's use a pepper to show you a little bit more advanced technique here for cutting. Number one is you want the pepper to be stable. This is a pretty good one. It's got a pretty good base, so I might not have to do this, but generally what you start with is you cut off the base to make it nice and flat. So now you have a very stable base, and you'll see a variety of ways to cut a pepper, but this is my preferred way because I think it's the most efficient and it involves the least amount of fuss. And that is, once you've cut the base, then and you can see that these have little kind of grooves or indentations there. And what I usually do is I just take and cut down like that, and like that, and like that. So you're creating flat pieces. And what you're doing is you're leaving all the stuff that you're going to throw into your stock pot or into your compost, and virtually nothing else. There's a little bit there. There's a tiny little bit there of the sort of the flavorless stuff in the inside and the seeds. So I literally have like 2 seeds on my cutting board now, and then you have these nice sections that you can work with that are already pretty flat and stable. So then you kind of organize your cutting board, and again, what you're going to do is use your claw grip. Your depending on what you're aiming for, but I'm going to make long strips. We call those julienne, and I'm going to have my claw grip, my knife with the bevel slightly this way, and you're going to use your basic rocking motion to create these strips like that. There we go. And once that's done, then this might be what you're aiming for right here, or maybe what you're going to do is you're going to, say, use this in an omelet or in something where you want to make a sauce, or you want them to be much finer. So this can now be used to make a dice, and you can line them all up like that. You can definitely put too many, but this is one whole block here. So I'm going to make a dice out of all of these like this. Just a nice fine dice that will be great for an omelet or a salad. There we go. So there you go. You got this nice, beautiful dice. One of the most important things with cutting anything, especially vegetables, is that the pieces are all approximately the same size, because that means that whatever cooking method you use, it's going to apply the same amount of heat to that piece, and it's going to be the same amount of doneness, which is what you want to achieve. So you want to make sure that your final product, the pieces are pretty close to the same size. And even these, you can see if I was to have a dish where I wanted just big pieces like that, then they're more or less the same size. They would cook at about the same rate. This one's a little bit smaller, but these are more or less uniform. And that makes for much more control over the cooking process. So let's do a little bit with a carrot here. First of all, I've scrubbed it with a pot scrubber in the sink. It's nice and clean, but it still has most of the peel on it, which has got nutrition and fiber. Cut off the end, put it there for compost. And then the important thing with a vegetable like a carrot is that you want to make sure that it's stable, which is pretty easy to do with a carrot. So if you wanted to make round slices, you're going to be mostly chopping. Your hand's going to be well away from that area, so that's a pretty safe thing to do. And then you're left with these nice round bits. Another thing you can do is to cut on the bias, which means that that you're going to end up with pieces that are a little bit wider surface area. So that means that each slice is going to pick up more flavor in whatever it is you're going to put on it. So that's a nice technique to add additional flavor. Other thing you can do is a technique where you roll with a small turn each time, like that. And this is great for something like a stew where you want chunks of vegetable that's slower cooking to maintain its crunchiness, its texture, and that gives you that nice sort of big chunk that still has, it's opened up a lot more of the carrot surface area to be able to be covered with flavor. So it's sort of twofold. One is it's a bit bulkier, so it holds its crispness longer, and it also has more surface area to absorb flavor. So that's a useful technique that you'll use with quite a few things: cucumbers, zucchinis, carrots, other root vegetables. It's a useful technique. And then what you want is you want a manageable length when it comes to something like a carrot. So I'm going to cut this one right in the center. And then what I'm going to do is I want to make a stable surface for the way I'm going to cut this. So I'm going to start by making one slice like that carefully. Notice my claw grip and that I'm tilting the blade a little bit towards me. I'm going to make that one slice like that because I'm going to make a series of flat kind of plates is what I'm going to do. So now I have a nice stable surface, and now I'm going to do more like a chop. So rather than the full rocker motion, because this is a little bit too big to do that, and because I want to line it up so that it's even through the whole cut, I'm going to do that. I'm going to make these nice thin plates like that. There's no way to do this really fast. You're going to do this until you get to the point where you lose the stability, and then you're going to more or less say that's it. So there we go. And now this is a little bit, these two have some roundness to them, so I may or may not use them, but the point is that I have these nice plates which don't have a lot of use with the carrots, so I'm probably going to proceed to reduce them to long strips, or I think they normally call that a julienne. And I like to kind of push the limits a bit. That's really a nice flat stacked set of plates that can line up really nicely, and I'm going to do my best to cut through that whole bit there because that'll save time. So there we go. And again, it's a modification of that claw grip. You're always thinking safety first, thinking about where are my fingers, especially as you get really close. And now that I'm at the end here, that's probably as good as it gets. So now I have these nice, beautiful strips that would be perfect in a soup or a stir fry. They're a little bit of a size for a soup maybe, but they would hold their crunch really nicely, so I might use that in a soup. For sure in a stir fry it would be really wonderful. So there we go. The other thing that I can do is I can line them back up again, and so that everything's all lined up, I can so use the edge of my knife to line them up, and then use the claw grip to hold them together, and then make this nice dice out of them. So there's another great dice. I could use that for making a sauce. I could use it for an omelet maybe. Could use it for quite a few things. It's not as useful for a salad probably because it's a little bit tricky to pick up now with all these all diced, but there we go, beautiful dice. All right, let's do a little bit of chopping with garlic. I'm not going to go over how to peel garlic because there's a lot of ways to peel garlic, and we'll just dive right in. Note that if you want to avoid the real sharpness of garlic, then beware if you have a little bit of green, that's going to end up being a really sharp garlic. And In general, when you have a garlic clove, what you want to do, if you want to avoid having overpowering garlic, if you have people who are sensitive to garlic as you want to consider opening the garlic clove up so that you can see the inside of it here, and then take a paring knife and just remove the little stemmy part inside there, or the little plant that's getting ready to grow, because that's where a lot of the bitterness is going to be. So you just dig that out of there. For me, I don't care. I love garlic, so it's going to stay put for the most part because I don't mind that. And there's often an ugly bit at the end there. I usually start by taking that off, and then what you're going to do is more or less the same as what we've been talking about. You're going to use your claw grip. You're going to have your garlic stabilized. So in this case, that was a big clove. I cut it in half. And then you're going to make thin plates like that. There we go. So you get these nice plates. And sometimes a recipe might call for grilling the garlic like that so that you have nice pieces. But in many cases, what you're going to want is you're going to want to make that smaller. And so you're going to take your plates and line them up. Let's just do a few here. And you're going to make strips like that. There we go. So that might be all you need for your recipe, or you might want to go down even further. And this is where it gets a little bit cumbersome to line them all up. So you're going to start using another technique, which is called a rocker technique, where you just leave the knife on the cutting board and you pivot like that, and you just go back and forth, and then just push your garlic back down. And you can do that really at any size beyond just the clove itself. You can start chopping about at that point. There we go. If you like garlic, this is the point where you start having lots of endorphins because it smells wonderful. Maybe because I've had allergies all my life, I really don't smell garlic very well. It's just enough that it's a wonderful aroma. For some people, it's overwhelming. But this is the point where I kind of enter a state of bliss. Wonderful smell. This is garlic I grew out of my garden, so it's really fresh and really, really amazingly delicious. Anyway, you go back and forth a few times until it's down to the point where it's where you want it to be. And there you have some nice grated garlic, finely minced garlic rather. Another thing you can do with garlic, if you want it even finer, you can make it into a paste. It's better to use a relatively coarse kosher salt, but it's okay to use regular salt as well. This is more of a regular kind of grind salt, sea salt, iodized sea salt, and just put there's maybe half a teaspoon there, or not even quite, maybe quarter teaspoon. So you put the salt on the garlic, and then you take, this is already minced pretty fine, then you take the edge of your knife and you squish and pull back like this. Squish and pull back. And what it does is that the salt acts as kind of a grinding agent, and it also draws the moisture out of the garlic, and it ends up creating this amazing garlic paste that you can then mix into a sauce, or you can there's a lot of things you can do with it anyway. If you want to have very fine garlic where nobody gets a real bite of garlic as a chunk in their mouth, then this is the ultimate way to do it. And then you just have to reduce the amount of salt in the cooking, because you, of course, are using a fair bit of salt to do this. But in the end, what you want is you want to have this beautiful paste that is almost like this spreadable stuff. Lovely. And it stores in the fridge for quite a while, so something you can prep in advance and have available for the whole week. All right, so for some things that are weird shaped, like broccoli would be a great example. Good way to do that is wash it up, put it upside down like that so you've got a nice stable hold on it, and then take and cut the florets off one at a time like so. There we go. Just keep working around. There we go. Once you get to the center, you can do that. We'll deal with this later. And once you get your florets cut apart like this, then a good way to keep them as intact as possible is to take your knife and just be very careful. It's hard to do a claw grip here, but you're going to go down like this through the base or through the stem like that, and then you're going to turn it 90 degrees and go down like so. And then you should be able to break these apart. There we go, where they're relatively intact chunks instead of all the little bits and pieces. So again, you get your hand out of the way like that, go down, turn it 90 degrees, go down like so, and then you should be able to just pop them apart into chunks that stay more or less together. There we go. So great for stir fries or salads where you want to have smaller pieces, but you don't want to have all the little tiny bits and pieces. You still want intact broccoli as much as possible. And then your stem, you can go after that because there's lots of goodness in the stem, and I usually just do a fairly rough peel like this, where you go down and you keep the knife going away from your hand and flip it upside down. And sure, there's other techniques, but this more or less gets rid of all the really fibrous stuff to the point where you now have broccoli stem that could be then sliced like this or cut like so and cut into chunks so that you can include that with your salad or your stir fry and not waste any of that beautiful stem, because there's lots of delicious goodness in the stem. Okay, so we're going to cut a few mushrooms, and principally because if you want to practice your knife skills, I would highly recommend cutting some mushrooms. They're like the perfect practice vehicle. And basically what you're going to do, these are just plain old button mushrooms, pop the stem off, and then just set them down. Get your hand in the proper position with your knife grip, and they're pretty small, so normally I just try to get my index finger and my middle finger positioned, and then everything else is sort of gripping the mushroom. And you're going to just make regular slices, so the idea is practice that motion. And if you visualize the handle going round and round on a wheel, see? Round and round on a wheel. That's the motion that you want to try to get burned into your muscle memory. So the idea is swoosh, 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 swoosh. Careful with the last bit. There we go. So there's some mushrooms. And you can do the same with a stem. Just chop, 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 chop. Again, tilt the blade a little bit towards you this way and have your claw grip, and then go slow at the end. There we go. Keep the stems separate if you like, but no big reason. You can saute them all together if you're going to saute. Put them in a salad like that if you want. So again, you want to make sure it's on a stable base. You don't want it like this. Wobbly stuff, not safe to cut. So you stabilize it, and then like that. There we go. The last one might not be so perfect, but that's okay. We're not trying to be perfect. We're trying to be good enough. That's good enough. And then, once again, you're going to visualize the handle going around and around like a wheel, like a bicycle crank, around and around and around and around, right? So that's a bit exaggerated, but the idea is, once you're really into it, it can go pretty fast till you get really close. There. There we go. Make short order and a lot of mushrooms that way. So even when you're going at a pretty good pace, you want to slow down at the very end there. Otherwise, you might have a little unscheduled pedicure.